I moved to Santa Fe on a Wednesday. It was dry golden and quieter than I expected. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, not yet more like someone just stopped talking mid-sentence, and the silence was waiting for the next word. I drove into town, with everything I owned packed in the back of a rented SUV. My GPS called out the final turn, like it meant something left onto Arroyo Chamiso Road, and there it was. The Keats Collective. The building didn't look like a billion-dollar company. No mirrored glass or black-tinted security gates, just an old stucco adobe structure low to the ground with reclaimed wood beams and iron light fixtures that looked like they'd been forged by hand. There was a tall ocotillo plant by the door, its spines backlit by the desert sun, and a brushed steel plaque on the wall. Keats Collective Sustainable Design for a Changing World. I stood in the parking lot for a minute, my hand still on the steering wheel, trying to decide if this was a good idea. Then I remembered what I left behind late nights in Chicago. Skyscrapers' endless revisions on luxury condo decks. No one would ever use a boss who used praise like a trick mirror. I shut the car door and walked inside. The studio smelled like cedar and white sage. Cool air hummed through vents that didn't whine. To my right, a sunken workspace with wide tables, pinboards covered in fabric swatches, sketches, stone samples, and folded blueprints. Everything was tastefully chaotic. Lived in. Ava, the office manager, met me with a small smile and a clipboard. "You're early. That's a good start." "I get nervous when I'm on time," I said, trying to smile back. She didn't laugh, but her smile deepened a little. "Vivian's not in yet. She had a site walk this morning. You'll meet her soon enough. Vivian Keats." The name meant something in the design world. She was in Dwell Architectural Digest Forbes. Not just a visionary architect, but the CEO who turned sustainable luxury into a movement. Her homes were sculptural, intuitive green, and so expensive they were practically theory. And now I worked for her. I was still being shown where the coffee was when I heard the door open. No one said her name, but every head lifted slightly. She walked in wearing a linen blazer, the color of wet clay, her dark, silver-streaked hair pulled back clean. The woman looked like she designed the desert. Everything about her was composed, fluid, but still. Like a river you shouldn't underestimate. Vivian glanced at the room, then at me. Her gaze landed without apology. "You're Isaac," she said. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." A flicker of amusement. "Don't call me that, sorry, just force of habit." She tilted her head slightly. "We don't do habit here, we do intention. Welcome to the collective." She didn't offer a handshake. She offered eye contact long enough that I wondered what she saw. Vivian moved past me and dropped a folder on the nearest drafting table. "You'll be shadowing the Clayridge build. Meet me on site tomorrow at 8:15 sharp. Bring boots. It's not just dust, it's living soil." "Yes," I said. "Absolutely." She was already walking away. Ava leaned in. That was friendly. For her. That night I couldn't sleep. My Airbnb smelled like orange peel and old books, and the ceiling fan clicked in a rhythm just slow enough to drive me crazy. I laid there thinking about her voice. Calm, but with weight. Like every word had already been edited before she spoke it. And that look focused, not cold, but held back. The next morning I stood outside the Clayridge site, 10 minutes early. A ridge above the city, scrubby with juniper and sagebrush, wide sky spilling blue in every direction. Vivian pulled up in a matte gray electric truck that somehow looked like it had its own personality. She stepped out in worn work boots and sunglasses. "You didn't get lost," she said. "Not yet." She walked toward the edge of the slope, motioned for me to follow. Below us was the beginning of a home foundation poured, rough framing, started a skeleton in the sun. "Designing for this land is about listening," she said. Most architects make noise. They impose. But this terrain, she pointed to the distance, it already knows what it wants. We're just learning the dialect. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Vivian looked at me. What do you see? I hesitated. Wind movement, solar arc, the natural water path. I think the site wants curves, not corners. A roofline that lifts toward the light. For a moment, nothing. Then she smiled almost to herself. That's not bad, Mr. Moreno. She turned to walk down the slope. Come on, we've got rebar to argue with. Later we stood shoulder to shoulder in the half-built frame, the scent of pine and earth between us. She was explaining the decision to cantilever the kitchen wall when she paused and looked toward the trail weaving through the hills below. There's a race next weekend, she said. Desert run, charity thing. My firm usually sponsors a few entries. I run it sometimes when my knee behaves. You still race? I asked, surprised. I hate losing, she said, her voice light but tight. Keeps me in shape. I smiled. Is this a challenge? She turned to face me, arms crossed, brow lifted slightly. If you beat me in the race, I'll reward you. I raised an eyebrow. Anything I want. Her lips twitched just the ghost of a grin. If it's within reason. She walked off to check the retaining wall. I stood there a second longer, the sun warm on my face, wondering what I'd just stepped into. That night I texted Carmen. She challenged me to a race. Carmen replied instantly. You challenged a billionaire to a foot race. You've been there 2 days. I didn't reply right away. I stared at my phone, then set it on the windowsill beside the worn paper blueprint she'd handed me earlier. Just a sample layout, she said. Nothing formal, but the margins were filled with notes in tight handwriting. Arroyo Crafast seasonal flow, south-facing passive heat, open to stars. I thought about her watching the wind, her voice steady the faint catch when she said, when my knee behaves. This wasn't just a race, this was a language, and I wanted to learn every word. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know, if not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The studio on Canyon Road came alive just after 9. Not with noise, but motion. Morning light filtered through the clear story windows, brushing warm gold across drafting tables and shelves, stacked with reclaimed wood samples, ceramic tiles, woven rugs. Everything breathed texture. I'd only been there a week, but already I knew how to move through the space without disturbing its rhythm. Designers whispered across tabletops. Eva padded through barefoot, holding coffee in both hands. One of the interns played ambient guitar on a small Bluetooth speaker, low enough not to interrupt thought. Vivian arrived late that morning. She moved quickly, like someone trying not to be late, but refusing to rush. She was wearing a black silk blouse tucked into high-waisted trousers, her hair in a twist. She looked like someone from a different time, or a better one. She didn't acknowledge me directly, just gave Eva a nod, handed her a folder, and disappeared into the glass-walled office at the back. A few minutes later, the message came through Slack Vivian Keats. Isaac Moreno meeting in 10. Bring the site sketches. Don't overprint. I typed back, on my way. When I stepped into her office, she was standing at the whiteboard, drawing a curve with a charcoal pencil. Her sleeves were rolled, and smudges of gray dusted her wrist. She didn't look up. You know why I hired you? I hesitated. I hoped it was because of my work. It was because of your questions, she said, still drawing. In your interview, you said, "What's the emotional role of a retaining wall?" That stuck. I let out a short breath through my nose. I get poetic under pressure. Vivian finally turned. Don't lose that. Most people do the longer they stay in this field. She moved to her desk, motioned for me to sit across from her. I'm assigning you to the Arroyo house as design support. You'll work with me directly. You'll sit in on client calls, sketch concepts, manage materials," and she looked up from the file, "Stay out of trouble." I raised an eyebrow. "Is there trouble to get into?" "Not unless you plan on mixing flirtation and deadlines," she said flatly. "Which I don't recommend." It caught me off guard. Not the words those were professional, but the look behind them. Controlled. Familiar. Like she'd learned the hard way. I nodded slowly. Understood. She paused, one hand on a page of elevations. "I'm not your enemy, Isaac, but I'm also not your story." "I didn't think you were." She stared at me for a beat too long, then looked back down. "Good. Let's get to work." The Arroyo house was their flagship for the year, perched on a slope just outside Tasuk, where cottonwoods turned gold in the fall, and the air smelled like piñon smoke and sun-warmed stone. The client was a tech couple from San Francisco who wanted low-impact luxury, which basically meant nothing too loud, but everything expensive. Vivian took the lead. I followed her into meetings, into site visits, into late-night desk critiques, where she circled minor window shifts with a red pen and said things like, "This corner isn't breathing yet." I watched the way she handled clients, warm, but reserved, accommodating, without surrender. She never gave more than she meant to, never lingered in praise. She'd offer a nod. A quiet, well-observed, a clipped smart. But when she said it, it mattered. By the end of the second week, I'd memorized the smell of the studio eucalyptus oil paper, faint traces of adobe dust carried in on boots. I'd also stopped checking my email after 10 p.m., except for hers. Her messages always came late. Subject: light study. See how the shadows move across the north corridor in option B. I think it's too flat after 3 p.m. Thoughts or subject detail. Sketch: do you sketch by hand or only digital? Show me your lines tomorrow. Don't sand them down. One night around midnight, I found myself redrawing a stair detail I didn't need to touch, just so I could show her something she hadn't asked for. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. She replied 10 minutes later. Subject: revision. You've got good instincts. Don't hide behind technique. My stomach flipped, like I was 19 again, waiting on a professor's approval. That weekend, I met Noah outside his pottery studio. He was throwing a fall sale, Muggs Bowls handmade tiles, all displayed under white canopy tents, flapping in the breeze. "You look haunted," he said, handing me a steaming paper cup of spiced apple cider. "It's just been a week." Noah raised a brow. "Or it's been her." I looked down into the cider. She's something I admitted, hard to read, sharp. But then she'll say something that stays in your head for 2 days. He grinned. Sounds like she's living there rent-free. I laughed, but it stuck in my throat. The following Monday, Vivian called me into her office again. She was in a soft gray sweater and jeans barefoot, which felt strangely intimate. She gestured toward her screen. "I need you to take the lead on the garden layout for Arroyo. I've overcommitted on Ridgeview, and I trust your eye." I blinked. "You're trusting me with client-facing design. You have the sensitivity for it." I moved toward the screen, studying the lot's slope, the drainage paths, the view corridors. Then softly, "Thank you." Vivian turned her chair slightly, watching me. "Do you want to ask me something?" I hesitated. "Do you always test new hires with races?" A pause. "No," she said. "But you seemed fast, like someone who runs from things. I wanted to see if you'd stop for something that wasn't on the map." I looked at her. "Is that what I did?" Her mouth curved just slightly. "You didn't win, but you didn't quit." She stood, walked to the window, arms folded. Outside, light danced through the sagebrush. "I built this company after the worst year of my life," she said quietly. "Divorce, lawsuit, headlines, all of it. I put everything into these walls because I didn't trust myself with anything I couldn't render or revise." I stayed silent. I don't build for money, she added. I build so I don't disappear. My voice came out softer than I expected. You're not disappearing. She turned to me. Good. Then get back to work before I fire you. There was the faintest smile beneath the words. As I walked out of her office, I wasn't sure what had just happened. But I knew one thing: this wasn't just a job anymore. And this wasn't just admiration. Something had shifted, quietly, irrevocably, and I wasn't sure if I was ready or already too far in. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when I pulled into the lot beside the Arroyo house site. The air held that high desert stillness, a quiet so complete it made your thoughts feel louder. I stepped out of the truck boots crunching on gravel and looked down over the slope. The framing crew wouldn't arrive for another hour. I liked getting there first. Something about standing in the skeletal silence of a building not yet born made me feel calm, clear, like I could actually hear myself think. I pulled out the sketch roll from the back seat and spread it across the hood. Morning light started to stretch thin across the mesa behind me, catching the edge of graphite lines. "You're early," came her voice low and smooth behind me. I turned. Vivian was walking toward me, thermos in hand, eyes shadowed behind sunglasses. Her jacket was unzipped scarf loose at her neck. "I like seeing it before the noise starts," I said. She nodded once, then held out the thermos. "It's chamomile and cinnamon. I made too much." I hesitated only a second and took it. "Thanks." She moved beside me, folding her arms. Her gaze swept over the site like she was reading it, not just looking. "Something's bothering you," she said without turning. I blinked. That obvious, you get quiet when you're thinking too hard. I let out a slow breath. I was sketching last night. Garden lines. You said to trust my instincts, but now I'm second-guessing every curve. Vivian leaned slightly against the truck, her shoulder brushing mine, just enough to register. "Show me." I unrolled a second sheet, hesitating before I pinned it down with a wrench and the thermos lid. She studied it in silence. "This path," she said, tracing the sweep with a finger, "wants to be slower. You're rushing people past the best part of the view. Let the curve widen here. Let it breathe." I watched her hand, steady, sure, and nodded. "I see it." She looked at me then, closer than before. "Stop editing before you build. You're allowed to discover it as you go." There was something in her tone that wasn't about design. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to say more. Later that morning, the crew arrived. Hammers, laughter, the diesel hum of a delivery truck. The quiet was gone, but something else had settled in its place. By lunchtime, we were back at the studio. I was sorting through tile samples in the back when I overheard voices from the conference room. "Are you sure it's smart, Marcus?" His voice was always smooth until he was concerned, then it clipped at the edges. Vivian replied, even cool. "What exactly are you asking me?" There was a pause. "You and Moreno, you've been visible. People notice." My hands froze on the box of samples. Her voice came quieter. "Nothing's happened." "But if it does," Marcus asked, "you're not just any executive, Vivian. You're the face. Clients expect I know what they expect." Silence. Then footsteps. I moved quickly, pretending to rearrange samples. Vivian walked past a second later, not glancing my way. Her shoulders were squared too tight. I didn't see her again until after hours. I'd stayed late to refine the layout, reworking the path curve like she suggested. The office was dark, except for the lamp above my desk and the faint glow coming from her glass-walled office. I stood unsure, then crossed the room and tapped on her door. She looked up. "Still here, I wanted to show you something." She didn't speak, but motioned for me to come in. I unrolled the sketch on her table. I widened the curve, slowed the path, Let it open to the light like you said. Vivian studied it, one hand resting near mine. Then softly, they think I'm foolish. I looked up. Everyone who sees me look at you too long, she said. Everyone who assumes they know what it means. I swallowed. Do you know what it means? She looked at me, really looked. That's the problem. I think I do. And I've made too many mistakes to ignore it. I didn't speak. She reached forward slowly, adjusted the sketch slightly. You didn't do anything wrong? It's me. I built this place so carefully with walls I didn't know I was putting up. I stepped back a fraction. I'm not trying to climb over them. I know. She paused. Then with quiet gravity. That's why it's harder. The silence between us pulsed. Not awkward, just full. Finally, she said, would you come with me to the Canyon House site tomorrow? I need another pair of eyes. Of course, I said. 7. She nodded. I turned to go, then stopped at the door. I wasn't going to ask for a reward, I said. She blinked, surprised. For the race, I added. But I think I'd ask for a moment like this. Just one. Vivian didn't answer right away. But she didn't look away either. And in the stillness, I felt something shift again. Not louder, but deeper. The kind of shift you only notice when you're finally quiet enough to hear it. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know, if not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The morning of the race started without ceremony. No fanfare, no warm-up playlist, just the early Santa Fe sun rising slow behind the hills, painting everything gold and quiet. I parked at the base of the trailhead, the same one she mentioned in passing. I run it sometimes when my knee behaves. The parking lot was half full. People gathered in soft clumps, stretching, laughing, adjusting bibs. Local charity run, 10 kilometers through sagebrush and switchbacks, ending at the overlook just before the old fire road. It should have felt casual. It didn't. I laced my shoes slower than usual, watching the dirt path snake upward, then disappear behind the ridge. Thought you'd back out. I turned. Vivian stood behind me in black running tights and a faded UNM track sweatshirt. No makeup, hair pulled back in a clean knot. She looked younger, but also more like herself. Don't tell me you came to win, I said. She handed me a small paper wristband. Registered you myself. You owe me $12. I raised an eyebrow. So it's official. Vivian gave a dry smile. It's always official. I slipped the wristband on, voice lower. Still offering a reward, she didn't answer right away. Just looked out toward the sunlit hills, then back at me. If you beat me, she said softly, I'll give you something I've never given anyone at this firm. I searched her face, like a promotion. Her expression didn't change. Something better. And then she walked away. The starting bell rang, not long after, just a cowbell shaken by one of the race volunteers. People cheered, lightly stepped into place. Vivian took her spot near the front. I drifted behind her, trying not to think too hard. The first mile was flat, easy. Gravel kicked underfoot. Breath even. At mile 2, we hit the incline. The group began to thin. I saw Vivian ahead of me, shoulders, steady stride, confident. She didn't glance back. At mile 3, she did. I caught up beside her. For a second, we ran in silence. Just footsteps and wind. You holding back? She asked. Not yet. She smirked. You should. I thought you hated losing. I do. We pushed forward. The trail narrowed into single track, weaving between junipers and scattered rock. The sun crept higher. Sweat prickled under my collar. Mile 4 came harder. The ground uneven, a subtle rise that demanded everything slowly. Vivian's breathing changed. not sharp-controlled. But I could tell she was adjusting. I stayed behind her. Not because I couldn't pass, but because it felt like the right place to be. At the bend before the ridge, she glanced over her shoulder. "You can take it," she said. I shook my head. "I'm not here for the medal." She slowed slightly, and I matched her. "Then why are you here?" she asked. I looked at her heart, still thudding. "Because you are." That stopped her, just for a moment, a step, a flicker in her eyes. Then she pushed forward again. The final climb was steep. Switchbacks with no shade, no mercy. We ran it side by side. The finish was marked by a single ribbon strung between two wooden stakes. No crowd, just a volunteer with a stopwatch and a clipboard. Vivian crossed first by a breath, not even a full stride. We stood at the top, panting, hands on hips. She looked over at me, her face flushed, eyes bright. "You let me win." I smirked. I thought it had to be earned. She didn't smile, just looked out over the valley, breathing, slowing. "I haven't raced in over 2 years," she said. "After the injury, I couldn't trust my knee. Every step felt like betrayal." I stayed quiet. "I almost didn't come today," she added. "But then I thought, if I can't do this now, when I'm the strongest I've been..." Then what was all the rebuilding for? Her voice broke a little. "Just a fracture." I watched her for a moment. "You're not alone, you know." She turned to me. "That's what scares me." A breeze moved between us, carrying the scent of wild sage and dust. "I wasn't asking for more," I said gently. "I just wanted to be near whatever this is." Vivian looked at me for a long time. Her walls were still up, but the door was cracked open. "I still owe you a reward," she said. "You don't, but I want to," she said. Then her voice softened. "Give me a little time." I nodded. "Take what you need." She looked down at the trail, then back at me. "There's a place I go when I need to think." "Tonight? After dark? If you want to join me?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I followed her down the hill, one step behind. Not chasing, not leading, just close enough to catch her if she stumbled, and far enough to let her run free. She texted me just before 9. "Vivian, leave in 15. I'll meet you at the old observatory lot. Bring a jacket. It drops fast up there." I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand it, but because it didn't feel like a work text. No bullet points, no links, no deadline hidden behind a compliment. Just an invitation. And maybe something more. I threw on a fleece, grabbed a thermos of coffee, and drove up into the hills. The road to the old observatory wasn't marked. Locals just knew the turn by the crooked pine and the rusted cattle gate. I followed the headlights as they cut through the trees, the tires crunching softly on dirt and scattered rock. When I reached the clearing, her car was already parked, tucked under the shadow of the old platform where the telescope used to be. Vivian stood near the edge, facing the horizon. The sky was layered in deep navy, the first stars pricking through. "You made good time," she said as I approached. "Didn't want to keep you waiting." She turned just enough for the moonlight to catch her face. No makeup, hair down, half tucked into her jacket collar. She looked like a woman who wasn't performing anymore. "I come here when I need to reset," she said, "before big decisions." I stepped beside her, handed her the thermos. She took it without comment, fingers brushing mine briefly. "What kind of decisions?" I asked. She sipped slowly, then exhaled. "Ones I can't walk back." We stood in silence for a moment, the wind moving through the pines behind us. I think she said, "Finally, I spent most of my career pretending control was the same as safety. But lately I can't tell if I'm protecting something or avoiding it." I looked at her. You mean us? She didn't deny it. I waited. Then she said, You scare me, Isaac. It hit harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. I don't want to be something you're afraid of, I said. You're not, she replied. But what you make me feel is... The air was colder now enough that I could see her breath as she spoke. She kept her eyes on the sky as if it made everything easier to say. I built a version of myself that could walk into boardrooms, answer to investors, lead 40 people win awards, and still sleep alone without flinching. I can handle isolation. I've even made peace with it. She turned toward me, voice lower. But I don't know how to let someone stay without building escape routes. I stepped closer. Then let's not label it. Let's not define it. Just let it exist. Vivian's eyes flickered down. And what happens when someone notices they probably already have? She gave a small, tired laugh. You're not wrong. There was something in her expression, half vulnerability, half resignation. And beneath that, something that wanted to hope. I'm not asking you to risk everything, I said quietly, but I am asking you to stop running from it. She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me the thermos and walked towards the edge of the platform, where the railing had long since rusted away. I followed, careful to give her space. Below us, Santa Fe glowed faint and scattered. Streetlights like fallen stars. Somewhere in the distance, a train sounded low and distant. You know, she said suddenly when I offered you that reward. I thought I was just being clever. I turned toward her, and now Vivian looked at me. Now I realize it was a test. I wanted to know if you'd chase me, or if you'd earn it and walk away. And she didn't look away. You stayed. The wind picked up again, tugging lightly at her jacket. I don't want to be your reward, she added. I don't want to be a goal you check off or a story you tell later. You're not, I said, stepping closer. You're not a chapter. You're the place I want to build from. She looked down for a second. Then finally back at me. I'm not ready to be seen, she whispered. Not yet. Not by everyone. You don't have to be, I said. Just by me. Something in her shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. She exhaled slowly, like letting go of something heavy. Then without a word, she reached for my hand. Her grip was warm, hesitant at first, then steady. We stood like that for a while, watching the city flicker far below. I haven't held anyone's hand in years, she said softly. I'll take good care of it. Vivian let out the faintest laugh. I'm not fragile, Isaac. No, I said. You're rare. She squeezed my hand once gently, then let go. I'm not promising anything, she said as we walked back toward the cars. I know, but I want to see where this leads. That's all I want too. She paused beside her driver's side door, looking at me over the roof. I'll text you tomorrow. I nodded. Drive safe. And then she was gone. The trail dust hadn't yet settled when I got into my truck. I sat there a moment, hands on the wheel, heart still beating like I'd just finished another race. Only this time I hadn't crossed the finish line. I'd found the start. Monday arrived quieter than usual. The studio felt like a held breath, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't name. Eva passed me my morning coffee with a nod, and I noticed her glance linger a beat longer than usual. Just long enough to make me wonder. Vivian wasn't in yet. Not late, just not early. I settled into my desk, pulled up the updated renderings for the Arroyo house, and tried to focus. But my thoughts kept slipping, drifting back to Saturday night. The way she'd stood under the stars, her voice low and unguarded. The way her hand had found mine, tentative, then certain. My phone buzzed once. Vivian team check-in at 10. Let's walk after. I typed back, I'll bring the site notes. But we both knew that wasn't why she wanted to walk. At 10, she walked into the studio like nothing had changed. Her hair was up, her blouse crisp, calm, deliberate steps across the polished concrete floor. She greeted the team sat at the head of the table and led the meeting like always. Clear, focused, no excess, no sign. If you hadn't known better, you'd think she hadn't opened her heart on a mountaintop 48 hours ago. But I knew, because midway through the meeting, as Eva listed supplier updates, Vivian reached across the table seemingly for a pen, and her fingers brushed mine. Just enough to say, I remember. Just enough to say, I'm still here. Afterward, we slipped out the back door together. No announcement, no lingering glances, just two people walking like colleagues, until we reached the far side of the lot where the path curved behind the retaining wall and out of sight. Vivian kept walking slow, silent. Finally, she said, It's strange, isn't it? How quickly something begins to matter. I glanced at her. It's also strange how long we can pretend it doesn't. She stopped walking, turned to me. Her face unreadable but softer than usual. I had dinner with Marcus last night, she said. He's concerned? I nodded. I assumed he might be. He said we're creating optics, that if it becomes known it complicates leadership, reputation, client trust. She paused. He wasn't wrong, and what do you think? Vivian looked at me. I think I spent most of my life working twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. And now that I've finally built something solid, I'm terrified of anything that might crack the surface. I stepped closer. I'm not trying to undo anything you've built. I know, she said. That's the problem. You're not the risk, but you're the variable. Her voice faltered. Just slightly. I keep asking myself, she continued, if I would have hired you had I known how this would unfold. And the truth is, I still would have. I needed your eye, your instincts, but now, you're scared it's more than just instinct. She nodded once, and scared it'll be seen as weakness. Silence stretched between us. Then I said quietly, we can draw boundaries if that's what you need. I can step back, take other projects, make this easier. Vivian's eyes flashed. Don't do that. Don't vanish just to make things cleaner. You said yourself it's getting messy. Yes, she breathed, but it's the first thing in years that feels real, that hung there weighty and raw. I broke the silence first. Then what do we do? She looked up at me, voice thin but steady. We protect it, carefully, quietly, until we know what it is. We stood close now, not touching, not yet. But the air felt charged again like the moment before a summer storm. Then suddenly footsteps. Fast, coming around the corner. Eva. She stopped when she saw us face carefully blank. Sorry, she said. Didn't know you were back here. Vivian didn't flinch. We were discussing the Arroyo update. Eva nodded once. Client just confirmed for Friday. They'll want walkthrough sketches. I'll have them ready, I said. She turned and walked off without another word. Vivian sighed, pressing her fingers to her temple. So it begins. I looked at her. You think she suspects she knows me, Vivian said. She's known me long enough to see the shift. Do you trust her? Vivian hesitated. Then, yes. But trust has layers. We walked back in silence. That night, just after 10, my phone buzzed again. Vivian, can you come by the studio just for a minute? I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and drove back through the sleeping streets. When I arrived, the lights were low. Vivian was sitting at her desk, a blueprint rolled out a single lamp casting warm yellow light across her hands. She looked up when I entered. I shouldn't have asked, but I didn't want to be alone with this sketch. I walked over. What is it? She unrolled the sheet. a concept elevation. A single-level structure with open courtyards, slatted roof lines, a wall of glass facing what looked like hills. "It's not for a client," she said. "It's mine. A house I've been designing for years, in fragments, never finished." "It's beautiful," I said. "It's where I'd live if I ever let myself stop performing." I met her eyes. "Maybe you're closer than you think." She didn't speak, just stepped around the desk, stood in front of me. Close. Closer. "I need to know something," she said. "Ask. If this costs me everything, reputation, client, stability, would you still stay?" I answered without hesitation. "Yes." Vivian nodded slowly. Then she leaned in, forehead resting against mine. "We'll build it slow," she whispered. "But we'll build it." I closed my eyes. This wasn't a race anymore. This was the foundation. Vivian opened the door barefoot. It was a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after the race, and she'd invited me over to go over finish schedules, but we both knew that wasn't the real reason. Her house sat on a quiet hill just outside the plaza, tucked between 2 cottonwoods and a low wall of sandstone. There were no numbers on the adobe, just a small metal sun nailed near the threshold. Inside it smelled like orange peel clay and something faintly floral. The windows were open, letting in the dry autumn breeze. Sunlight spilled across the wide wooden floors, catching on stacks of books, ceramic bowls, and a low vase of dried sage. She pulled the door wider. "Come in. Don't mind the chaos?" "This is chaos," I stepped in. "Looks like a magazine spread." I had 2 days off, which means I touched every object in the house and questioned its purpose. I smiled, setting my sketch roll by the door. Productive anxiety. I know it well. She laughed, but softly. "Tea always." While she moved toward the kitchen, I wandered the living room. A framed black and white photo of a Frank Lloyd Wright house sat on a low shelf beside a small bronze sculpture of a running woman, her hair blown back like fire. On the wall above the fireplace hung a mixed media piece, layers of torn paper paint and stitched thread. Bold, but fragile. She made that, Vivian called from the kitchen. "Who my mother?" I turned. "That's hers." She nodded, placing 2 mugs on the coffee table, one of the few things I kept. I sat on the edge of the couch, careful not to wrinkle any of the neatly stacked papers beside me. "You don't talk about her much," I said. Vivian lowered herself into the armchair across from me. "She's a complicated subject." I waited. She was brilliant, uncompromising, wild, the kind of woman who never apologized for anything, not even when she should have. She wrapped her fingers around her mug. She taught me how to see, how to feel space. But she also taught me how to shut the world out when it got too close. "Sounds like you inherited both." Her gaze met mine. Not defensive, just honest. I've spent years unlearning half of what she gave me. The air in the room felt still. Not tense, just full. Vivian leaned back, 1 foot curled under her. "Anyway, I didn't ask you here to unpack family trauma." "I don't mind," I said. "I want to know the corners, not just the clean lines." That made her pause. Then she stood, walked toward a tall cabinet, and pulled out a thick set of printed elevations. "Let's pretend we're here for work, at least for the first hour." I took the plans, spread them across the coffee table. "Canyon House." She nodded, settling beside me. "I want to revisit the roofline. The pitch feels too expected." We leaned in together, shoulder to shoulder, ink and paper between us. For a while we did talk design. Angles, materials, sightlines, but it was impossible not to notice how her voice softened when she was close, or how every now and then her hand would brush mine as she reached for a pencil, and she wouldn't pull away. Halfway through a sketch, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. The glow of the screen caught something in her expression a flicker. "Everything okay?" I asked. She turned it face down. "It's Marcus." I raised a brow. "Studio-related." Vivian hesitated. "He wants to meet tomorrow." "Off-site," said it sensitive. I sat back. "He knows." "He suspects," she said. "Eva told me he's been asking questions, and apparently someone saw us at the observatory trailhead." I looked down at the sketch between us. "Do you want to get ahead of it?" Vivian shook her head slowly. "No, not yet. If we make it a story, they'll own the narrative. I'd rather keep building until we're strong enough that no one can tear it down." I studied her face. "And if they try anyway, then I'll find out who stands with me." I nodded. "You won't be alone." Her hand moved toward mine again, this time not by accident. She laced her fingers through mine, held them gently. "I know," she whispered. Later she showed me the upstairs loft. A sun-drenched room with a wide drafting table, worn rugs, and windows that opened to the hills. "This was the first room I designed for myself," she said. "No client, no brief. Just space to be." I walked to the far window, looked out over the land. The light was golden now, soft around the edges. Santa Fe had a way of making things feel timeless. Behind me, Vivian said quietly, "You feel like that sometimes." I turned. "Like what? Like space to be?" She crossed the room, slowly stopped just in front of me. I didn't move. I didn't need to. When she leaned in, it wasn't rushed. It was deliberate. Her lips brushed mine once, then again, and then she stayed close, forehead resting against mine. No words, just breath. Just presence. When we pulled apart, she didn't let go of my hand. "We should go slow," she murmured. "I'm not in a hurry, I am," she said, eyes soft. "But I'll wait." We walked downstairs, hand in hand, our steps quiet on the old wood. Outside, the first leaves had started to fall. Marcus had a way of sitting still that made people nervous. Not from aggression, he wasn't that type, but from how deliberately he used silence. At the downtown cafe where he'd asked to meet, he stirred his espresso exactly 3 times, set the spoon down precisely on the saucer, and didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Vivian sat across from him, back straight, sunglasses on the table, face unreadable. "You've been different," he said finally, not looking up. "Since the race, since the Canyon House redesign, since him." Vivian didn't flinch. "If you're asking whether I've compromised my work, the answer is no. I'm asking if you understand how the board will perceive this." She met his eyes then. "There's nothing official to perceive." Marcus tilted his head. "Unofficial things are still dangerous, especially when you've spent 20 years building a reputation on discipline." Vivian leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "Is that what you think this is, a lapse in discipline?" Marcus paused. "I think it's not like you." That made her laugh softly, but with an edge. "Then maybe you never knew me." He sat forward, elbows on the table. "Vivian, look. I'm not here to shame you. I know how lonely this gets. I've been doing this with you long enough to see it. But if people start talking, and they will, clients will take sides. Investors will pull back. You've protected this firm with your life. I just don't want to watch you lose it." Her voice was calm, but cool. "Are you warning me or threatening me?" Marcus held her gaze. "I'm reminding you." She nodded once, slow. "Then let me remind you I built this firm. Every corner, every decision. If people lose faith in me for choosing connection over solitude, then maybe I'm done protecting the wrong thing." He sat back silent again. "I appreciate your concern," she added, standing. "But don't mistake that for permission to interfere." As she walked out, Marcus didn't follow. That afternoon she didn't return to the studio. Eva handled the team check-in. I watched her eyes flick to Vivian's empty office more than once. But she didn't ask. By evening, I was packing up my desk when my phone buzzed. "Vivian, drive with me. I need to breathe." 20 minutes later, I climbed into the passenger seat of her SUV. She didn't speak, just pulled out of the lot and headed north. Windows cracked, music low, something acoustic, familiar. We didn't say anything until we were halfway up the winding road that cut through the pines. Then she said quietly, "He thinks I've lost control." I didn't have to ask who she meant. "I think I said you've finally started choosing what matters." Vivian's hands were tight on the wheel. I knew there'd be fallout, but I thought I could manage it in silence. "You're not alone in this." She gave a tired smile. "That's the part I'm still getting used to." We drove until the road narrowed and ended at a small pull-off overlooking a canyon. The last light of day was fading, casting deep blues and golds across the stone. Vivian cut the engine but didn't move. She sat staring out the windshield, then finally turned to me. I used to think I had to earn rest, earn affection, earn being understood. Like I had to win every race before someone would choose me. "You don't," I said softly. She looked at me, eyes tired but open. "And what if I mess it up anyway?" "Then we start again." She nodded slow, then leaned back in her seat and looked out at the canyon. "Marcus is right about one thing. This will get harder before it gets easier." I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. "I'm not leaving," I said. She turned her head, looked at me with something close to wonder. "Why I didn't have to think." "Because you make the risk feel worth it." Her breath caught just slightly. Then she whispered, "I think I'm falling." My heart beat harder. But I didn't rush in. I didn't make a joke. I just sat with it. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She was asking if she could trust the ground under her feet. I squeezed her hand. "Me too." We sat there for a long time, watching the canyon disappear into darkness, our hands resting together on the console. No promises, just presence. And in that silence, something sacred settled between us, quiet but undeniable. Something we'd both been running from finally catching up. The studio buzzed louder than usual that Thursday. Conversations were sharper. Eyes lingered a little too long, and when silence settled, it came with weight. I felt it when I walked through the door, like something just beneath the surface had cracked open. Eva caught me near the printers. Her voice was low. "Just a heads up. The Arroyo clients requested a call with Vivian, directly, not through project leads." "Did they say why she hesitated?" "They didn't have to." I nodded once. "Thanks." Vivian's door was closed. Light on, blinds drawn. I didn't knock. I waited at my desk for the better part of an hour, trying to finish a section detail, but my mind kept skipping. Eventually the door opened, and she stepped out. Her face was composed, but her jaw was tight. "They want to pause," she said, walking straight past my desk. "Completely. They say it's timing market shifts, but it's not." She grabbed her coat from the hook near the entrance. "It's optics." I stood. "Do you want to talk?" She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Take a walk with me." Outside the sun was high, but the air had cooled. Vivian pulled her coat tighter as we moved through the small alley behind the building, where the garden sat half-shadowed and quiet. "They were the first project I pitched when we opened this branch," she said, voice thin. "The first client that made people believe we could lead from here." I walked beside her slow. "Then this hits more than just numbers. It hits my core," she said. "I built something clean, disciplined, and now they think I've blurred the lines. You haven't done anything wrong." "They don't care," she snapped, then softened. "Sorry, I knew this was coming." I thought I was ready. She stopped walking, turning to face me. I hate how easily one rumor can unravel a reputation I spent years stitching together. I looked at her, really looked. Your work speaks for itself, your leadership too. But if they can't separate who you are from who you're with, maybe it's not your reputation that's weak. Maybe it's their vision. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it away before it could fall. I want to believe that she whispered, I really do. We stood there in the garden, quiet. The breeze shifted, catching the scent of pine from the hill. Somewhere behind us, a wind chime moved gently on someone's porch. Finally, she said, Marcus scheduled a board meeting. Monday. Says it's procedural, but he's already circling the conversation around succession and leadership ethics. I exhaled. He's pushing, and I can't prove anything without feeding it. Vivian looked at me with something close to fear. It wasn't the kind that came from weakness. It was the kind that came from knowing exactly what's at stake. I won't let them take it from you, I said. Her voice cracked then. Just slightly. I'm not sure it's still mine to keep. I stepped closer. If you ask me to disappear from the studio, I will. If you need space, I'll give it. But if you want me beside you when you walk into that boardroom, I won't hesitate. Her eyes locked on mine. And if standing beside me means you lose this job, I never came here for the title. She gave the faintest shake of her head. I don't deserve that kind of loyalty. Yes, you do, I said. You just don't believe it yet. Vivian stepped closer, not quite touching. Not yet. I keep asking myself if this is worth what it's costing. And she let the silence stretch, then whispered, Yes, it is. We didn't say anything after that. We didn't need to. Later that night, after most of the team had gone home, she called me into her office. The light was soft. Her coat was draped on the chair. A candle burned near her window, cinnamon and cedar. I need to show you something, she said, motioning me over. She rolled out a set of prints across her desk, one I hadn't seen yet. This was the original Canyon House layout, she said. The one I drafted before you joined the team. I studied it, strong lines, beautiful. But something was missing. And this, she said, unrolling a second, is the version we've shaped together. Immediately, I could feel the difference. It wasn't just improved. It was alive. The spaces breathed. The light had purpose. The walls told stories. You helped me design a place I'd actually want to live in, she said, voice low. Not just something impressive on paper. I looked at her. And what does that tell you? Vivian met my eyes. That maybe I've been building for other people too long. She stepped around the desk, closer now, her voice just above a whisper. I don't want to pretend anymore. Not here. Not with you. I didn't move. I didn't speak. She reached up and touched my collar. Just a small adjustment. Just enough to close the space. I want the board to know who I am, she said. Even if it means starting over. You won't have to, I said quietly. But if you do, we'll build something better. She let out a breath, long and slow. Then she did something I hadn't seen her do in weeks. She smiled. Not for show, not out of defense, just simple, honest relief. You always say the right thing, she said. No, I said. I just don't lie to myself anymore. We stood like that, side by side, watching the city lights blink through her office window. The storm was coming. But this time we were ready. The night before the board meeting, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the lights-off laptop glowing softly on my lap, sketch files open but untouched. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the ticking clock over the fireplace. I wasn't nervous for me. I was nervous for her. Vivian hadn't said much after we left the studio. She'd just sent a short message. Don't worry. I'm clear. And I knew what she meant, clear in her decision, clear in her worth. But clarity doesn't guarantee outcomes. And in a room full of cautious investors and old-guard thinkers, it didn't take much to shift perception. By morning, the sun had barely broken through when I pulled into the lot. Vivian's car was already there. The rest of the team would arrive later, but she was early, of course. Always first to show, last to leave. It was how she'd built everything. Her office door was slightly ajar, soft classical music playing through the speakers. I knocked once and stepped in. She stood by the window, arms crossed loosely, her black blazer. Crisp hair pulled back, but not tight. Not armor. Just real. "You came early," she said without turning. "I wasn't going to let you walk into that room alone." She turned to face me. Her eyes were calm. Focused. But there was a thread of something else there, too. Gratitude, maybe, or just quiet readiness. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything. If this meeting doesn't go how we hope, if the board votes to cut ties or demand changes..." "I'm not walking away," I said before she could finish. She studied me for a long beat, then nodded. "I need you to stay visible today," she said. "Not for show, but because the only way I win this is by being honest about why it matters. Are you sure I've spent years hiding the parts of me that didn't fit a spreadsheet? Maybe it's time they saw what leadership actually looks like." She reached for her bag, pulled out a slim leather folder, and handed it to me. "Read this after," she said. "Not before." "What is it, blueprints? But not the kind we submit." Before I could ask more, she walked past me out into the hallway toward the boardroom. At 9 a.m., sharp the door shut behind us. 10 people around the table. Marcus at the far end, silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the soft morning light. A few nodded to Vivian. Others didn't. I recognized most of them advisors, legal reps, 2 investor reps, and 1 an empty chair. Vivian stood without notes. "I won't take much of your time," she began, her voice steady. "But I'll be direct." She looked straight at Marcus. "I know there's been talk about boundaries, about appearances, about ethics, and I'll address them." A few people shifted in their seats. "Yes," she continued, "I am in a personal relationship with Isaac Carter. No, it did not begin during our interview process. No, it has not impacted his performance or mine." She turned toward me for half a second, not for reassurance, but for grounding. "But this conversation shouldn't be about who I love," she went on. "It should be about what we've built. Together." She clicked the remote in her hand. The screen behind her lit up. Renderings of the Canyon House, side by side with the original. "This isn't just architecture," she said. "This is evolution, emotional intelligence, vulnerability in design, and yes, collaboration built on mutual trust." She paused, scanning the room. "I have given this company 20 years. I've turned down offers, burned out vacations, postponed milestones in my personal life because I believed in this team, in our mission, in building structures that last." She took a breath. "And if the cost of choosing love is your confidence in me, then I'd rather step down than live a half-life to please a room full of people who forgot what risk feels like." Silence. Long. Full. Marcus finally cleared his throat. "Vivian, no one's asking you to step down. Not yet," she said. "But let's not pretend this isn't the undercurrent." One of the investor reps leaned forward. "Vivian, you're one of the most disciplined minds we've backed. No one disputes your talent. But optics matter. This," she gestured between us, "changes the equation." Vivian didn't blink. "Then maybe it's time to solve for something else." The room was still again. Then someone spoke. Quiet, deliberate, it was Elena Price, the oldest member of the board. Architect turned mentor now, mostly advisory. I met my husband while working under him, she said. We kept it secret for 6 months, lost our minds trying to pretend we weren't in love. And when it came out, people whispered. She looked at Vivian. But they also respected that we never let it affect the work. And the work spoke for itself. She turned to the rest of the room. So maybe we should stop acting like vulnerability and professionalism are enemies. A beat, then another voice I motion we move forward with no action taken against Vivian or Isaac unless concrete evidence shows harm to operations. Marcus opened his mouth, but it was too late. Seconded, someone said. Vivian's shoulders dropped, just slightly. The motion passed, 8-1. As the room cleared, Marcus stood and adjusted his cufflinks. You made a gamble, he said to Vivian. No, she replied. I made a choice. He looked at me, then walked out without a word. We were the last ones in the room. Vivian turned, looked at me. You still have that folder? I held it up. I didn't peek. She smiled, then nodded toward it. Open it. Inside sketches. A house plan. Not the Canyon house. This was different, smaller, more personal. Still modern, but with intimate rooms, curved corners, layered light. A home, not a showpiece. And a handwritten note on the last page. Let's build something that doesn't need approval to stand. I looked up at her. She was watching me, expression soft. Open. I didn't need to say anything. We were already beginning. Vivian's house felt different that evening. Not because the furniture had changed, everything was still in its place. The same linen throw on the sofa, the same hand-built shelves lined with art books and pottery. The same warm light falling through the living room windows as the sun dipped behind the hills. But something had shifted. It was in the way she moved. Slower. Less guarded. As if, for the first time in years, she wasn't bracing herself for something to fall apart. I didn't expect Elena to speak, she said, pouring us both a glass of wine. She never talks at those meetings unless it's numbers or legal liability. She didn't talk, I said. She backed you. Vivian handed me a glass. That mattered more than I realized. I followed her to the couch. We sat close legs, just touching. I thought I'd feel triumphant, she admitted. Like I'd won, and I don't feel like I won. I feel like I finally stopped hiding. I set my glass down and turned toward her. You've never looked more sure of yourself. She gave a soft smile, but her eyes were distant for a moment, thoughtful. When I started Keats Studio, I promised myself I'd never build on unstable ground. Not in business, not in design, but somehow I still did it with myself. I made sure everything looked solid, while I quietly kept all the soft parts hidden. And now I'm realizing the soft parts were the foundation all along. We sat in that quiet for a few beats, the kind that don't need to be filled, the kind that say everything in silence. Then she looked at me serious again. There's something I haven't told you. I waited. She pulled her feet up on the couch, tucking them beneath her. I've been offered a fellowship in Vancouver. It's a 6-month urban planning residency. I applied over a year ago thinking I'd never get it. And then the acceptance letter came 2 days ago. That knocked the breath from my chest for a second. Wow, that's huge. I didn't bring it up because the timing was messy, and I didn't know what I wanted. She looked at me carefully, measuring my face. But I do know now. I sat up straighter. You're going no. She said it without hesitation, not because I'm giving anything up, but because I'm building something more meaningful here. She reached over, took my hand. You. This. The studio we talked about. The kind of projects that don't make magazine covers but change lives in small, lasting ways. I looked at her quietly, stunned. Vivian? That fellowship would have been a step toward something I thought I needed to feel fulfilled. But this, she squeezed my hand, is where the real work is. And where the real love lives. My chest felt full. So full I couldn't speak for a second. "You're sure?" I finally asked. She nodded. "I've chased credentials my whole life. What I want now is connection." Outside, the wind rustled through the cottonwoods. Inside, everything felt still anchored. She stood then, walked over to the shelf, and pulled down a thick, leather-bound journal. "There's something else I want to show you." She flipped it open, set it on the coffee table. Inside were dozens of hand-drawn floor plans, elevations, sketches of homes, courtyards, studios, each one paired with a note in her handwriting. "They're all ideas I shelved," she said. "Projects that were too personal, too small for investors, too raw." I flipped through slowly, stunned by what I saw. A house built around a single sycamore tree. A studio shaped like a spiral shell. A tiny home modeled after her grandmother's adobe. "These are incredible. They're emotional architecture," she said. "Spaces that breathe. And I want to start building them with you." I looked up at her. "You're talking about starting our own thing?" She nodded. "A real partnership. Equal ownership. We'll take one client at a time. Low volume, high care." My heart raced. "Vivian, that's a massive shift, I know." Her eyes softened. "But after everything, the race, the board, the choice to stay, I don't want to go back to safe. I want to go forward with heart." And in that moment, I saw the turning point, not just in her, but in both of us. This wasn't just a romance. It was the beginning of a life. Built slowly, built honestly, built to last. 2 weeks after Vivian turned down the fellowship, the quiet momentum between us shifted into motion. We rented a small studio space in an old brick building off Canyon Road. Used to be a ceramics school, now split into units for local creatives. It had tall, dusty windows, a warped wooden floor, and just enough warmth in its bones to feel like it had been waiting for us. She stood in the middle of the room that first morning, arms crossed, a pencil stuck behind her ear. "It's not glamorous," she said, half smiling. "It's perfect," I replied, stepping beside her. "And it's ours." We spent that first day cleaning. Not just the space, but the mental clutter we'd carried for years, contracts we didn't believe in, design briefs that drained us, the pressure to constantly scale. Gone. Here we'd build slow, with intention. Vivian pinned our first hand-drawn sketches to the wall with tape and thumbtacks, something she hadn't done since her early years in LA. She called it falling back in love with the process. That afternoon, Carmen stopped by. She stepped in, looked around the space with her hands on her hips, then whistled low. "Well," she said, "this is cozy and rebellious." Vivian laughed. "That's pretty much our brand." Carmen pulled out a paper bag. "I brought lemon bars. And some unsolicited advice." "Only if it's sweet," I said. Carmen handed me the bag and turned serious. "I heard Marcus is soft pitching your departure as a sabbatical. No formal announcement. Just letting you fade from the narrative." Vivian's jaw tightened. "That's what I expected? He wants the board to remember his version of you, not the one who chose heart over hierarchy." "Let him," Vivian said. "I'm not going back to prove a point. I'm moving forward to live one." Carmen exhaled. "I just don't want you erased." Vivian walked over, touched her shoulder. "If the work speaks for itself, I won't need to shout." They hugged, and when Carmen left, Vivian stood at the window for a while. "Quiet. You okay?" I asked. She nodded. It's a strange thing. Walking away from something you built. Even when it's the right choice, it doesn't mean it didn't matter." She turned to me. "But maybe it wasn't the whole picture. Maybe it was just the foundation." That evening we sat on the studio floor surrounded by Prince tea mugs and a playlist that drifted between Bon Iver and Nina Simone. Vivian pointed at a sketch of the tree house-style cottage we'd been refining, our first official project. "I want this one to feel like a deep breath," she said. "Like a place you come to remember who you are?" I added. "Exactly." She reached across the mess of papers and touched my hand, her fingers warm, steady. "Do you think," she asked softly, "this can last? This rhythm? This peace? Us?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I think it can," I said. "Because we're choosing it. Over and over." She smiled. Not her professional smile, not her guarded one. The one she rarely used. The one that looked like morning light. "I'm glad you beat me in that race," she said. I laughed. "You let me win?" "No," she said, leaning in. "I let myself lose. On purpose. For once." We kissed slow and certain. No urgency. Just the kind of kiss that came from knowing the hardest parts were already behind us, and the unknown ahead was something we'd meet together. Later, as we turned off the lights and left the studio for the night, Vivian paused at the door. She looked back at the taped-up sketches, the hand-scrawled notes, the dust still clinging to the edges of the windows. Then she said quietly, "We're not proving anything anymore." I nodded. "We're just becoming." She locked the door, and we stepped into the dark, hand in hand, building forward. 2 months later, the studio felt alive. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting golden stripes across the hardwood. Vivian had rearranged the furniture 3 times that morning. She claimed it was for better light exposure, but I knew her restlessness meant something was stirring inside her. She finally settled across from me, floor plans spread out on the long work table between us. I can't decide between an open-sky atrium or a glass roof for the Tamarind project. Both invite the desert in, but the glass keeps it gentle. I looked at the sketches. What does the client want? They said, "Make it feel like healing. No pressure." I smiled. Then go with the atrium. Let the rain hit the earth. Let the wind move through the space. Healing doesn't always need a filter. She paused. Looked at me like I'd just solved something much bigger than a design choice. "You always say the right thing." "No. You just know when to listen?" Vivian turned the page in her sketchbook and started drawing again. I watched her for a moment, pencil moving fast and free, so different from the woman I first met, all control and sharp corners. This version of her moved with grace. Not because she had less to prove, but because she'd stopped proving anything. The door chimed. We both looked up. A woman stepped in, early 40s, sleek black bob-fitted jeans, soft leather boots. Her eyes landed on us like she already knew who we were. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "I'm Sophie Alvarez. I was given your name by Elena Price." Vivian's brows lifted, then softened. "Come in. Elena doesn't give referrals lightly." Sophie stepped forward, pulled a thin folder from her bag. "I run a nonprofit that supports transitional housing for women aging out of the foster system. We're finally funding a full-scale project, a 10-home compound. We want it to be restorative, safe, beautiful, not just functional." Vivian gestured to the chairs. "Sit. Tell us more." For the next hour, Sophie talked, and we listened. About trauma-informed architecture. About lighting that calms rooms that feel like a choice, not an obligation. About building for dignity, not just shelter. When she finished, Vivian leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were glassy. "I spent part of my childhood in foster care," she said, voice low. "Not long. Just long enough to remember how thin a wall can feel between you and the world." Sophie nodded. No surprise in her eyes, just understanding. Vivian looked at me. "We take this project, of course." After Sophie left, we stood quietly in the studio. "She didn't say it," Vivian said. But that kind of build doesn't get full funding up front. I know. We'll have to cover part of it. Maybe a lot of it. I nodded slowly. Still worth it. She let out a long breath, then turned toward the back room. I want to show you something. We walked into the tiny room we'd turned into a materials library. Vivian pulled out a large flat box and opened it carefully on the workbench. Inside sample tiles, fabric swatches, small woodcuts, clay models. This is from my first personal commission, she said. Back in San Diego, the client was a woman in recovery. She wanted her home to feel like a promise to herself. She picked up a fragment of turquoise tile. She cried when I installed this in her kitchen. Vivian turned to me. I've spent years designing for power, for legacy, for ego. But the projects that stayed with me, they were for people trying to belong to themselves. I stepped closer, touched the edge of a tiny adobe model. I think we found our real direction, she said. Let's stop designing for magazines. Let's build for healing. My throat tightened. I'm in. We began drafting that night. By the time we left, stars had filled the New Mexico sky. The street was quiet, the city curled into sleep. As we walked to the car, Vivian slipped her hand into mine. You know what still scares me? She asked. What? That this kind of joy feels so undeserved sometimes. I stopped and turned toward her. You didn't stumble into this joy, Viv. You fought for it. You tore down walls to find it. She looked down for a moment, her voice quieter. Sometimes I still hear old voices in my head. The ones that say softness is weakness, that love is a distraction. I reached up, touched her cheek. Then let's drown them out. Every day. With work that matters. With love that doesn't flinch. She leaned into me, resting her forehead against mine. And for the first time in all the months we'd known each other, I felt her let go completely, not of control, but of doubt. This wasn't just the next chapter of a career. It was the start of something sacred, something made not of concrete or design, but of choice. A blueprint for belonging. One soul at a time. It rained the morning of the open house. Not a heavy downpour, just a steady, whispering drizzle that softened everything it touched. The kind of rain that makes the air smell clean and the earth feel awake. Vivian stood at the window of the nearly finished first unit of the Tamarind project, watching water bead across the glass. Her arms were folded, her expression unreadable. They'll come, I said gently, stepping beside her. I know, she murmured. It's not that. Then what is it? She took a long breath. I've spent months pouring my heart into this, into every light fixture, every tile, every curve of the wall. But what if it's not enough? What if the women who walk in don't feel what I want them to feel? I reached for her hand. You didn't build this with your head, Vivian. You built it with your history, with your healing. That's what they'll feel. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't pull her hand away either. I wish my mother could see this, she said softly. She would have never said it out loud, but I think deep down she was proud when I left that old life behind. Even if she didn't understand it, she'd be proud of this too. Vivian smiled barely. She'd ask why we didn't make the kitchens bigger. We both laughed, and some of the tension eased. By noon, the rain had stopped, and guests began arriving. Sophie brought 2 of the women already placed in the upcoming units, along with staff and supporters from the nonprofit. Carmen came too with a tray of homemade cornbread and a camera slung over her shoulder. This place, she whispered as she stepped inside. Vivian, it feels like a hug, a real one, the kind you don't want to end. Vivian blinked fast. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time. As the afternoon wore on, people moved through the rooms, touching walls, asking questions, pausing at the soft, quiet details. The circular reading nook with floor cushions. The natural wood shelves stocked with donated books. The skylight above the communal kitchen island that let sunlight pour down like a blessing. I found myself watching Vivian more than the crowd. How she guided guests gently. How she stepped back so others could take the spotlight. How her hand lingered on the doorframe of each room like she was blessing it in her own quiet way. But then halfway through the afternoon, I noticed her go still. She was standing near the back hallway, eyes locked on someone I hadn't seen arrive. A woman, late 60s, sharp gray bob, tall posture pearl earrings. Vivian's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's your mother," I guessed. Vivian nodded slowly. "I didn't invite her. We haven't spoken in over a year." The woman approached heels soft against the polished concrete. She stopped just a foot away from Vivian. "I saw the article," she said, "in the Santa Fe Chronicle, about the project and about you." Vivian's face was unreadable. "I didn't expect you to come. I didn't expect to," her mother replied. "But I couldn't stop thinking about it, so here I am." Silence. Then her mother glanced around the hallway. "It's beautiful," she said, almost reluctantly. "It doesn't look like anything we ever lived in. But it feels like what I would have wanted for us." Vivian's voice was low. "I didn't build it for us, I know." Another beat. "I wasn't good at giving you softness," her mother added. "I didn't know how, not back then." Vivian's throat moved. "You were surviving. I understand that now." Her mother looked down, then back up. "I still have the blueprint you drew for your dream house when you were 11. Vivian's breath caught. "It had a purple roof and a slide instead of stairs," her mother said, smiling faintly. "You made 2 front doors, one for you and one for guests." Vivian gave a broken little laugh. "I was always designing around connection." Her mother looked at her with something new in her eyes, something between sorrow and pride. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Vivian stood still for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for coming." Her mother stepped back. "I'd like to support the project." Quietly, "If that's all right?" Vivian looked at her, and for the first time in years, something softened between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the opening of that possibility. As her mother walked away, Vivian turned to me, her expression full of 100 quiet emotions. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I think I just built something big enough to hold us both." We stayed until sunset, cleaning up after the guests had gone. Carmen packed up the last of the food. Sophie locked the gate behind the final van of volunteers. When the light dimmed, and it was just the 2 of us again, Vivian walked back into the common room and stood there alone. I joined her. "Do you remember what you said at the beginning?" she asked me quietly. "Which part if I beat you in the race?" I smiled. "You'd get anything you want." Vivian turned to me, her eyes full. "I didn't want things," she said. "I wanted peace. I wanted roots. I wanted to stop running." She reached for my hand. And I got it. I squeezed her hand gently. We both did. Outside, the rain had returned. Light soft, steady. Inside, everything was still. And enough. 6 months later, the Tamarind Project was no longer a dream. It was lived in. You could feel it in the kitchen walls warmed by the aroma of simmering soups and morning coffee. You could hear it in the laughter echoing from the courtyard as women planted herbs, swapped stories, argued gently over music choices. You could see it in the windowsill gardens, the door wreaths, the family photos taped beside light switches. It was home now. Vivian and I stood outside Unit 4, where Marla, 65, gray curls tied back in a bandana, was teaching 2 younger residents how to reupholster a chair. She caught Vivian's eye through the open door and raised a hand, beaming. Vivian waved back, smiling so softly it barely moved her lips. Do you think she asked me, still watching the scene, we knew what we were doing? When we said yes to this, I tucked my hands in my pockets. I think we had no idea. But we said yes anyway. That's how all good things begin. She leaned her shoulder into mine, and we stood like that in the spring sunlight, listening to life unfold inside the space we helped bring into being. Later that day, back at the studio, I came in to find the lights dimmed, and Vivian hunched over the desk surrounded by a fresh batch of sketches. She was barefoot, her reading glasses low on her nose, a pencil between her teeth. "What is this?" I asked, stepping closer. She pulled off the glasses and turned a sketch toward me. It was a house. Simple. 2 bedrooms, sunroom off the back, built on the same soft curves that shaped her favorite desert trails. There were handwritten notes in the margins. Stone fireplace sourced locally, kitchen facing east for morning light, room for a garden, built-in bench by the entry. A home, not a statement. I looked at her. For us, I asked. Vivian nodded. It's time. She stood and placed the sketch gently in my hands. You said once that beating you in that race was the beginning of something, she said. I didn't realize then what you meant. What did I mean? I asked, voice quiet. You weren't racing to win. You were racing to reach me. My eyes met hers, and something old inside me settled. You let yourself be caught, I whispered. No, she said. I let myself be known. We broke ground that summer. The property was just outside Santa Fe, a dusty plot of land nestled between wild grasses and cottonwoods. From the porch to be, you could see the mountains to the north and the open sky folding out in every direction. We worked slow, on purpose. We built the frame with old friends and new ones. We painted the walls ourselves, even when we disagreed about the shade of white. We chose salvaged wood for the floors, and Vivian designed a fireplace that wrapped like an embrace around the living room. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and we stood in the half-finished kitchen, Vivian brushed dust from my cheek and said, This is what I wanted when I started Keats Studio. I just didn't know it yet. A kitchen I teased. A life she replied. With room for love. For pauses. For days that don't need to be earned. When the house was finished, we moved in with little ceremony. Just a few boxes, a bottle of wine, and a shared sense that we were stepping into something rare. We cooked that night with the windows open. The breeze smelled like sage and warm earth. Vivian danced barefoot on the tile, stirring a pot of chili and humming off-key. I watched her from the doorway, arms crossed, heart wide open. This woman. This life. No headlines, no contracts, no boardrooms. Just a home filled with quiet magic and rooms that remembered who we were when we arrived, and who we became when we chose each other every single day after. Later, curled beside me on the porch swing under a blanket, Vivian looked up at the stars and whispered, You know. I used to think winning meant being alone at the top. And now I know the real reward is choosing not to run. I kissed her temple, then rested my cheek against hers. And in the quiet desert night, with nothing left to chase and everything ahead to build, we finally let ourselves rest. Together,